later in the evening, and the type of job that I have a 7 to 3 shift, so it kind of was counterproductive as far as work. But from the perspective of my husband, it was a little bit frightening, if not to say, to say the least. Sometimes what I did was, if it was a report that was coming in from someone who was living on the other end of the county, and I knew I had maybe an hour and a half drive, I would call them, because I needed to get the information while it was fresh in their mind. There were cases where I did go and meet them in a public spot, and I'll tell you a very interesting case that never made it to the books, because when the witness finally met me, they ran away. No, I'm only kidding.
You never know. You never know.
Had a diner with me and showed me. And Gary, I'm not kidding you. Everything I'm telling you right now, I swear, with my right hand up in the air, is the truth. They had a film of these. The only way I can describe them is that they looked like huge lights that were streaking across the sky. And as she was driving, and here's what happened. She was driving to a choir practice, and she was meeting her mother there. As she came out of choir practice, it was later on in the evening, around this time, Eastern time, 10 o'clock. She looked out her driver's side window. She was alone because her mother lived in the area. She didn't. She had to drive over to be able to practice with her. And she saw these 3 lights that were following her. And it's not lights, well, you've seen a plane when it's coming in. It looks like a light. And it could be very bright. They were round. They were unmistakably round. And from what I saw on the film, they were really much bigger. There were 3 of them. They were trailing her. Spooked her for a little bit. She exited the highway. She was on the highway. She exited the highway and started entering towards her neighborhood, and they had disappeared. She didn't think anything of it. But now, these practices she was having was week after week. She noticed that when she came out the 3rd time of the church, where they had the practice, these 3 orbs were hovering right above the church.
Interesting.
So as people were dispersing in the parking lot, she leaps into the car, gets in, she drives off, and there they are. They're following her. They're not following anybody else but her. And this time, this 3rd time, she actually drove into her garage, and she came out, looked out the kitchen window, and they were there, right above the house.
That's scary.
Okay, so the 3 weeks that her husband was away, this was happening. When he got home, all things went crazy. She says, you got to ride with me the next time I go on this choir practice, yada, yada, yada. Of course, he thought she was going crazy. He says, well, you know what? I'm going to bring the little video cam, and I'll go with you if you really want me to do this. Please do. Yeah. And that's how it came about. So then he started videoing from right behind her these things that were following, and she got a video. So I met with her, interviewed her, talked to her, got a sense of, what she was feeling about what these things were. She had no explanation for it. She showed me, and then I said, well, will you report it to the website? Or I will report it for you. It ended up she didn't want to report it, yada, 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 or maybe I could report it. I finally reported it, withheld names, and then I called her back up. I said, I need you to upload the video that you showed me. Never did.
Well,
so there's some unreported cases.
Well, there's quite a few cases, Let's face it, a lot of people, now in the last couple of years, it's not like it used to be. When I was starting out in broadcasting back in the late 70s, if you started talking about UFOs that you saw one, people looked at you rather strange. Nowadays...
I still get that.
Yeah, but not like it used to be. Because of the internet, people are more accepting to it, and because it's been so much more sightings and weird things going on. Even the news media is being more open about, reporting some strange things up in the sky. So I think that has made a major change. But, you know, a lot of times people are scared to sit there and say, I saw a UFO, because sometimes their husband or the spouse, either one might, you know, start wondering about them, you know, their credibility. So, you know, I can see some people don't want to do that because they don't want to be labeled as that. But I think it's important. If people see it, they need to report it.
Exactly. Well, I think part of the fear, and this is what I've seen with people, is that they're afraid that someone in their job would find out, which I fully understand. They're afraid somehow that, you know, neighbors would start kind of avoiding them, because it's not something that everybody experiences. And what's interesting is that the people who do experience them tend to have a repeat occurrence. You know, they might see something, or they might encounter something, and then months, weeks later, it happens again. And then we notice that there's a trend, that there seems to be a cluster of similar encounters within families. So it's not something the general public experiences so much, but it does occur within certain groups of people. Now, I don't know what type of person, I don't know, but it's hard to disbelieve them when you talk to them in person, because these people are in responsible positions, or people who are really just down to earth, that would stand to lose everything, their reputation, their jobs, their friends, if they actually came out in public. So I understand the reluctance. I really do. And from a first-person point of view, having seen and experienced some of these things, I fully understand, because you can't classify it. There's really no way to explain to someone what you have really, truly experienced unless that person has also seen it. Now, and this leads me to another story, because we're not just talking about lights in the sky. We're not just talking about...
I want to jump in.
Go ahead.
I want to jump in first. You know, Peter Davenport, you know, for all the years he's been running the UFO Reporting Center, has lately been, and I go lately, the last maybe 4 months, has been getting reports of UFOs, then aliens being seen on the ground. And it was really funny. You know, back a few months ago, I had a sergeant from one of the largest cities in Oregon. He was going to come on my show, but then he decided after a week or two, he better not, because he's close to retiring. And that scared him. But when him and his wife was up by Tillamook, Oregon, they were going camping, and they were off somewhere in the woods, and he spotted what he claimed was 2 aliens. And he told his wife took a look, and as his wife started seeing them, poof, they were gone. And then about a week later, Peter Davenport was on our network talking about reportings, and then he started talking about he was getting reports of basically the same thing. In fact, a report maybe about 60 miles away from the one that this police sergeant seen. And, you know, he didn't even know that I was even going to talk about it. And it's strange. There's been a lot more people reporting that more now than ever. So I got a funny feeling that we are being more than just flybys anymore.
Yeah, I think they're becoming, and I don't want to use the term aggressive, because for the most part, the reports that I have gotten, you know, the witness accounts that I have, are from things that have never really hurt anyone. Okay? And the caveat is most of them. I will tell you of 2 instances where the witness actually believes that something happened to them as a result of an encounter.
Yeah, please do. I mean, is it like a thing? You know who Timothy Collin is, don't you?
Actually, no. Tell me.
Okay, I think he was number 12 or number 13 implant removal from the late Dr. Roger Lear. He saw him and his wife saw a UFO, and and they didn't think much of it. They just looked at it, and then several weeks later, he goes to the doctor because he was involved in a car accident previously. So he was going back, and they did some X-rays and stuff, and then they noticed a piece of weird metal in his arm. And the doctor said this couldn't have been from the type of car accident you had, because you know what, your accident didn't create any particles or anything to have gone into your body. So he
Right.
contacted Dr. Roger Lear, which they did an extensive background, both, mental, x-rays, the whole everything. And they removed the item out of his arm. It turned out to be an implant. It was silver-based, but the compound of the silver, it could not have been created on Earth. And I think it was number 12 or 13, implant removal. But,
oh, my gosh, from the same person.
Yeah, and you know what? It makes me wonder, how many people are walking around out here that maybe have implants and don't even realize it?
And don't realize that they're being monitored.
Oh, yeah.
Which brings me to the next case that, has gone unreported until now on the air. It is part of a book that I had written. There was a gentleman, and I, of course, there will be no names here. After the show aired about all the major cases that happened here in Bucks County, I was approached by someone, and I was just, doing some shopping. I came out of a wine store. Not that I come out of a wine store all the time, but in this particular time frame, I was coming out of a wine store. A gentleman approached me and said, I recognize you from the show. I want to let you know about something that really troubled my girlfriend, something that happened to her just about a month ago. And he seemed very concerned, and I think what he wanted was an explanation or at least some validation that, nothing was happening to her mentally. So we sat down for a few, and he, of course, I had my notebook with me. I still carry it to this day. I started writing down a little bit of everything. But apparently in a small park, and this happened around dusk. This was probably, I would say, September, I believe, is when it occurred. The young woman who was the topic was jogging. She had just come out of her car, and she routinely jogs this little park that's along a river. There were people there who were also similarly parked, but as parks go in our area, they close at dusk. She was driving in a little late. She wanted to do her 2 to 3 miles, so she figured, hey, maybe just this time, I can kind of violate the park rules and just do my jog and then quickly jump in the car and get out of here. So people were packing up, cars were leaving right and left of her. She proceeded to park the car, came out, wearing her jogging outfit, sneakers and everything. And then she noticed she was alone, basically, in the park. A lot of people would have fled by then. I would, for one.
Me too.
But just joking. But anyway, she started running, and as she was running, she was parallel to the river, and there were trees on the one side. There was the path that she was jogging on, and as she proceeded down, further and further down, it got darker, of course, because the evening was coming. And you have to remember, this is now late September, so it's much cooler, and over here on the East Coast, depending on where you are, the nights come in quicker. She made a turn around the bend, and as she was coming back, I think she had probably done a mile or 2 miles by then, she was coming back towards the car. She observed that there was a vehicle behind her car. And then first thing that came to her head that she reported was it could have been a cop that saw that there was still a car in the park, and she knew she wasn't supposed to be there. So she started jogging faster. She didn't want to be in a situation where, the cop was going to give her a ticket. So she's jogging, the car's getting closer, And then she pauses because she realized that the vehicle behind her car was actually hovering behind her car as opposed to being parallel and sitting on the road, if you get what I mean.
So it was floating off the ground.
It was floating off the ground behind her car, above the ground. by a few feet.
Ooh.
And it wasn't